I was standing at the bathroom mirror, straightening the collar of my old flannel shirt, when my phone buzzed on the edge of the sink. I figured it was my son reminding me what time to show up. He had called twice that week already, both times mentioning how important it was that I be there Sunday at noon, that the whole family would be together, that we needed to talk about the future. I told him I would be there. I even stopped at the bakery on Friday and picked up a pecan pie, the kind his mother used to make every holiday, because I wanted to show up as a father, not just a guest. But the message on my screen was not from my son. It was from my old colleague, Dr. Frank Aldridge, a man I had worked alongside for 31 years at Meridian Medical Group before either of us retired. Frank was not a man who sent dramatic texts. He was careful, measured, the kind of person who chose every word like he was writing a legal brief. So when I read what he had written, my hand went cold. "Don't go to that house today. Call me right now. I mean it, Walter." I sat down on the edge of the bathtub. My legs felt strange. I dialed his number and he picked up before the second ring. "Walter." His voice was tight in a way I had not heard since the year we lost 3 colleagues in 18 months. "I need you to listen to me very carefully." He told me that his daughter-in-law worked in the records office at Claremont County Probate Court. That morning, processing a Friday backlog, she had come across a filing, an emergency petition for conservatorship. The petitioner was listed as Daniel Marsh. The subject of the petition was Walter Allen Marsh. Me, my own son, had filed to have me declared legally incompetent. I did not say anything for a long moment. Outside my window, a cardinal landed on the feeder my wife Patricia had hung from the dogwood tree 14 years ago. I still filled it every Sunday morning. "He's claiming cognitive decline," Frank said. "Delusions, inability to manage finances, risk to personal safety." He has a signed statement from a Dr. Reeves attached to the filing. "Walter," I looked up Reeves. "He is not a neurologist. He runs a concierge wellness practice in Scottsdale. He's not even licensed in Tennessee." I thought about the last 6 months, the way my son had started calling more often, asking about my accounts, offering to help me simplify things, the way his wife, Renee, had started sending me articles about senior living communities, leaving the brochures on my kitchen counter when they visited, acting like she had left them by accident. I had chalked it up to concern. I had told myself they meant well. I had been a fool. "There's a hearing scheduled for Tuesday morning," Frank said. "But Walter, that dinner today." His neighbor told my daughter-in-law that there is a doctor coming. "A friend of Renee's," she said, "for a wellness check." A wellness check. At a birthday dinner for my grandson Caleb. "Frank," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. "Thank you." "Don't go, Walter. Come to my house. We'll call an attorney." "I'm going," I said. "Walter, I need to see it for myself. I need to hear them say it out loud." I looked at my reflection in the mirror. 68 years old, gray at the temples, a little slower going upstairs than I used to be. But my mind was sharp as a scalpel. Always had been. "I'll call you when I leave." I went to my closet and changed out of the flannel shirt. I put on a plain beige cardigan with a small stain on the cuff from a coffee spill in March. I scuffed my shoes slightly on the doormat before putting them on. Then I went to the bottom drawer of my desk, the one I kept locked, and I took out the digital voice recorder I had used during depositions back when I served as an expert medical witness. I checked the battery. Full. I slipped it into the inside breast pocket of the cardigan. If my son wanted a confused old man, I would give him the performance of his life. The drive to Daniel's house took 25 minutes. He lived in a development called Brookhaven Estates, the kind of neighborhood with stone entry pillars and a homeowners association that sent letters if your mailbox paint chipped. The house was a 4-bedroom colonial with a 3-car garage and a landscaping bill that probably exceeded my monthly grocery budget. I had watched them buy it 6 years ago and wondered quietly how a regional sales manager and a part-time interior decorator could afford the mortgage. I had never asked. That had been my second mistake. I parked my 12-year-old Buick between a silver Lexus and a black SUV I didn't recognize. I sat for a moment with my hands on the wheel. I thought about Patricia. Gone 7 years now. She had always been the one who saw people clearly. She had said once, after a particularly strained Thanksgiving, That Renee looked at our family the way a contractor looks at a building calculating what it would cost to renovate. I had defended Renee. I had told Patricia she was being uncharitable. I got out of the car. I let my shoulders roll forward slightly. I let my steps shorten. I rang the doorbell and stood there blinking mildly in the autumn sunlight. Daniel opened the door. He was wearing a cashmere pullover and holding a glass of sparkling water. He was 41 years old and had the practiced grin of a man who had spent his career in sales. "Dad." He said it too loudly. The way you greet someone you half expected might not show up. He reached out and gripped my shoulder. We were starting to wonder, did you have trouble finding the highway? I had driven this route approximately 200 times. "The signs are different," I said, letting my voice go a little thin. They moved things around. He exchanged the briefest glance over his shoulder. I did not react. Inside, the house smelled like expensive candles and roasting chicken. Caleb, my grandson, came running from the living room the moment he heard my voice. He was 8 years old and threw himself at my midsection with the full force of a child who has not yet learned to calculate impact. "Grandpa Walt!" he shouted. I held on to him for an extra second. "There he is," I said softly. "Happy birthday, buddy. Come meet Dr. Holloway," Renee said, appearing from the kitchen in a silk blouse. Her smile was the temperature of a refrigerator. "He's an old friend of mine from Vanderbilt. He's just passing through town." Dr. Holloway was seated in the living room in the good armchair, the one guests were always placed in so the family could face them from the sofa. He was in his mid-50s with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and a leather portfolio on his knee that he had not bothered to hide. "Walter," he said, standing and offering his hand. "I've heard so much about you." "Have you?" I said pleasantly, letting my handshake be slightly limp, my gaze drifting a half-second past his ear before returning to his face. "Daniel tells me you were in medicine yourself." "Oh, a long time ago," I said, easing into the couch with an audible exhale. "Before my wife passed, things get fuzzy." "Nothing gets fuzzy." I had run the internal medicine department at St. Augustine Regional for 19 years. I had testified as an expert witness in 42 malpractice cases. I had published 11 peer-reviewed studies on diagnostic error. But I let the words hang there and watched Dr. Holloway write something in his portfolio before I had finished my sentence. The dinner itself was a careful production. Renee had set my place at the far end of the table, separated from the main conversation by the length of the centerpiece. My fork was plastic. Everyone else had silverware. When Caleb asked why Grandpa had a different fork, Renee said quickly that I had mentioned my hands were shaky lately. I had mentioned no such thing. I let the fork tremble as I lifted it. I let a small amount of salad dressing drip onto my napkin. I watched Daniel watch me and nod almost imperceptibly at his wife. Dr. Holloway was seated close enough to make conversation. He was skilled, I had to admit. He worked in references to dates and current events the way a fisherman works a lure, casual, patient, waiting for a slip. I gave him small ones. Not enough to alarm, just enough to confirm what he needed to write. "Do you remember what year Caleb was born?" he asked, as though making gentle conversation. 2000. I paused. Let my eyes go slightly unfocused. 17? 18? They blur together when you don't work anymore. Caleb was born in 2016. I knew that the way I knew my own heartbeat. Holloway wrote something down. Daniel leaned back in his chair with the satisfied posture of a man watching an investment mature. It was Caleb who broke the script. He had been sitting quietly with his birthday cake plate, picking at the frosting, and then he looked up with the completely unfiltered candor of an 8-year-old and said, "Dad, is Grandpa going to live at Sunrise Gardens now?" The table went still. Sunrise Gardens. I knew that name. It was a state-contracted long-term care facility on the east side of the county. I had evaluated 3 patients there over the years during malpractice reviews. The building smelled of industrial bleach, and the staff-to-resident ratio was cited as inadequate in 2 consecutive state inspections. "Caleb." Renee's voice was a wire pulled tight. "That is not dinner conversation. But you said, after today." "Caleb, that is enough." I looked at my grandson. He looked back at me with wide eyes, uncertain now whether he had done something wrong. I gave him the smallest possible smile, invisible to everyone else at the table. "What's Sunrise Gardens?" I asked, letting my voice come out bewildered and mild. "It's nothing, Dad," Daniel said smoothly. "It's just a community we looked at, for the future, for options. Like a resort? Something like that." He was already moving past it, picking up the thread of conversation with Holloway about something unrelated, but I saw Renee's hand close over her wine glass a little too firmly. I excused myself to use the restroom. I did not go to the restroom. Daniel's home office was at the end of the hallway, door slightly ajar. I moved without shuffling, without hesitation, the way I moved alone, and stepped inside. The room smelled of takeout containers and financial anxiety. 3 monitors sat on the desk, 2 of them dark. The center one glowed with a screen that had not timed out. I moved to the desk. His email was open. The inbox was a disaster. Final notices, account suspension warnings, a subject line that said, "Brookhaven Estates HOA, foreclosure proceedings initiated." I opened that one. They were $63,000 past due on a line of credit secured against the house. The property had been used as collateral for a business loan 2 years ago. The business had apparently dissolved. I opened his recent documents folder. There was a file labeled Dad Estate Planning. I opened it. Inside was a draft power of attorney document, a draft will revision, and a letter from a financial advisor I did not recognize, recommending liquidation of assets held in trust by the subject's estate. There was also a highlighted printout of Tennessee conservatorship statutes. I took photographs with my phone, every page, every screen. My hands were absolutely steady. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway. I moved to the bookshelf in 3 quiet strides, pulling a book from the shelf and opening it at random. The footsteps stopped outside the door. I let my knees bend slightly, let my head tilt, let my mouth go slack. The door opened. It was Renee. She looked at me, then at the desk, then back at me. "Walter." Her voice was careful. "The bathroom is the other direction." "I was looking for the old photo albums," I said, blinking at the book in my hand. "Daniel used to keep them in a room like this. There are no albums in here." She stepped toward me and touched my elbow with the grip of a person redirecting a shopping cart. "Come on. Caleb is about to open his presents." I let her guide me back down the hallway. As we walked, I heard her exhale slow, relieved. She thought I was lost. She thought the old man had just wandered into the wrong room. She had no idea what I had just seen, or photographed. After the birthday cake, after Caleb tore through his presents and Daniel poured himself a 3rd drink, Renee brought out a manila folder and set it on the coffee table with the deliberate casualness of someone who had rehearsed the moment. "Dad," Daniel said, leaning forward, "we just need you to look over a few things. Just updates, insurance paperwork, really, so we can make sure you're taken care of." I looked at the folder. I let my eyes squint. "I left my reading glasses in the car," I said. "We can read it to you." Renee reached over. "It's really just standard. I don't like signing things I can't read," I said, in a small, stubborn voice. "Patricia always said to read before you sign." "Dad," Daniel's tone shifted. "Just slightly. Just enough. A little harder at the edges. This is about protecting you. Renee and I just want to be able to help with your medications, your appointments, in case something happens." "Nothing's happened," I said. "The incident with the stove last month," Renee began. "I never had an incident with the stove." My voice was still mild, still wandering, but I let a sliver of genuine sharpness enter it, just for a second, before I softened it again. "I don't think I did." Holloway, seated to the side, murmured something and opened his portfolio again. Daniel pushed the folder closer. "Just sign where the tabs are. It's just so we can help." I reached for the pen he offered. I held it loosely. I let my hand begin to move toward the signature line. Then Caleb appeared in the doorway in his pajamas, holding his new toy robot, and said with complete innocence, "Grandpa, are you going to call me from Sunrise Gardens?" The pen slipped from my fingers and fell to the carpet. I left it there. "I'm tired," I announced. "I need to go home. I'm very tired." Daniel looked at Holloway. Holloway gave a small nod, the kind that said, "We have enough for tonight." Daniel helped me to the door with a hand on my back that steered more than supported. He gave me a hug at the threshold that lasted exactly as long as obligation required. Renee stood a few steps back, watching, her arms folded against the chill coming through the open door. "We'll pick you up Tuesday morning," Daniel said. "For the appointment, okay? Just be ready at 8. Tuesday. The conservatorship hearing." "All right, son," I said. I walked to my car in short, uncertain steps. I waited until I turned the corner at the end of the block. Then I sat up straight, rolled my shoulders back, and took the first full breath I had taken in 3 hours. I called Frank. He answered before I finished pulling onto the main road. "Walter, tell me, get me the name of the best elder law attorney in the state," I said, "and clear your Monday." I drove to Frank's house. We sat at his kitchen table with 2 cups of decaf, and I walked him through everything. The photographs, the conservatorship filing, the HOA foreclosure, the document labeled Dad Estate Planning. When I put my phone flat on the table and let him scroll through, he was quiet for a long time. "Daniel put the house up as collateral?" Frank said. "The Brookhaven house." "Yes. He doesn't own that house outright?" "Apparently not. The bank does, and so does his creditor." I wrapped both hands around my coffee mug. "Frank, I need to make 3 calls tonight. The first is to Robert Geary." Robert was an attorney I had known for 20 years, a man who had cross-examined me twice in depositions and respected me more for it each time. The second is to my financial advisor. And the third, I paused. "Do you remember the medical trust Patricia and I established in 2009? Frank looked up. "In 2001, I had co-developed a diagnostic protocol for early-stage sepsis identification that was eventually licensed to hospital systems in 34 states. The royalties flowed into a blind trust we had established under a Delaware holding company. Patricia had insisted on keeping it separate from our personal finances because she wanted to give it away someday, to a hospital foundation, to residency programs, to somewhere that would use it well. We had told no one. Not Daniel. Not anyone. The trust had been compounding for 15 years. "How much?" Frank asked quietly. "Last statement put it just over 9 million. Frank set down his mug very carefully. "Daniel thinks I live on my pension and Social Security," I said. "He thinks I drive a 12-year-old Buick because I can't afford better. He's right that I drive it. He's wrong about why. I had kept it simple on purpose. Patricia and I had watched too many families fracture over inheritance expectations. We had decided early that our children should build their own lives without measuring themselves against ours. It had seemed like wisdom at the time. Tonight, sitting in my friend's kitchen at 10 o'clock on a Sunday, I understood that wisdom and naivety could look identical from the outside. "Robert is going to want to file an emergency motion by morning," Frank said. "I know, but I need something else first." I looked at him. "I need to know who actually holds the title to Daniel's house." Frank pulled out his own laptop. "The Brookhaven Estates property at 4412 Creekside Lane, according to the County Register of Deeds that Frank accessed through a public records portal, was listed under a creditor entity called Northgate Capital Lending, LLC. The original mortgage holder had transferred the note 6 months ago following a default. Northgate Capital was a private lending firm with a reputation in legal circles for aggressive collection practices. "They're going to move on the house," Frank said. "Yes," I said, "unless someone buys the debt first." He looked at me. "Call Robert," I said. "Tell him I want to acquire the outstanding note. Full balance. Wire transfer. Tonight, if possible." "Walter, it's my son's debt, Frank. If I own it, I set the terms. And unlike Northgate Capital, I'm not interested in a payment plan." Frank stared at me for a moment with the expression of a man who has just realized the chess game he was watching had been several moves ahead of him all along. Then he reached for his phone. I drove home just after midnight. The house was quiet in the way that houses are quiet when only one person has lived in them for several years. I went to my office, unlocked the bottom drawer, and sat down. I took out the recorder and pressed stop. Then I opened my desk drawer and removed a legal pad and a pen that actually had ink, unlike the one that had rolled off Daniel's coffee table. I wrote a list. Every asset I knew of. Every account. Every document I would need Robert to have by morning. When I finished, I looked at Patricia's photograph on the corner of the desk. "I know," I said to her. "You always knew." I slept 4 hours. I was dressed and at Robert Geary's office on Commerce Street before 8, wearing the suit I had last worn to accept a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Tennessee Medical Association 2 years prior. Robert met me at the door himself, which told me Frank had been thorough in his explanation the night before. We worked through the morning, the emergency motion to dismiss the conservatorship petition on the grounds of procedural fraud, the documentation of Dr. Holloway's lack of Tennessee licensure, the transfer of debt from Northgate Capital, which had been exceedingly happy to sell a distressed note for full value in cash finalized at 4 a.m. through Robert's emergency contact at the title company. The title search confirming that the house at Brookhaven Estates, the house my son had lived in for 6 years and spoken about as his own, was owned by an LLC that held numerous properties throughout the county, an LLC that I had formed in 2008. Not because I had planned any of this. Because 18 years ago, Daniel had come to me with a young wife, a new baby, and a salary that would not stretch to a mortgage in a good school district. I had bought the house through the LLC quietly. I had told him it was owned by an investment client of mine and that I had arranged a nominal lease. He had never questioned it. He had grown so comfortable in it that he had forgotten, apparently, that he did not own it. He had used the house as collateral for a loan. He had pledged a property that was never his to pledge. Robert looked at me across his desk at 10 in the morning. You own the house he's trying to have you declared incompetent from. I do, and you hold the note on his personal debt. As of 4 this morning, Robert leaned back in his chair and interlaced his fingers. Walter, I've been practicing law for 35 years. I want you to know this is not something I encounter regularly. I appreciate your saying so. What do you want to happen on Tuesday? I want them to come to the hearing thinking they've already won, I said. I want Daniel to walk into that courtroom expecting a confused old man who can barely hold a pen, and then I want him to meet me. Tuesday morning was cold, the sky the particular flat white of a Tennessee November. I arrived at the Claremont County Courthouse at 8:45 inches, the charcoal wool suit and the burgundy tie I reserved for serious occasions. Robert walked beside me. We did not speak in the elevator. We did not need to. The hearing room was small, wood-paneled, the kind that made everyone's voice sound slightly more accountable than it would elsewhere. Daniel and Renee were already seated at the petitioner's table with an attorney I did not recognize. Daniel was in a blue suit that was a size too large at the shoulders, a detail I noticed because his father had taught him to check the fit at the shoulders and he had apparently forgotten. Renee sat with perfect posture and a yellow legal pad she was not writing on. She was the first to see me come through the door. I watched her hand stop moving. I watched her turn to Daniel and touch his arm. He looked up. His expression traveled through several states in approximately 2 seconds. Recognition, confusion, and then something that was not quite fear, but lived in the same neighborhood. I walked to the respondent's table without altering my pace, pulled out the chair, and sat down. I placed my briefing folder flat in front of me. I looked at Robert. Robert looked at the opposing attorney with the mild, pleasant expression of a man who knows exactly where the exits are. The judge was the Honorable Carol Meacham, 63 years old, known in the local legal community for her intolerance of procedural shortcuts. She entered the room, looked at both tables, and said, "Before we begin, I understand there are preliminary motions." "Your Honor," Robert said, "the respondent moves to dismiss this petition in its entirety on the following grounds." He placed the licensing complaint for Dr. Holloway on the table: no Tennessee licensure, no direct patient relationship, no examination conducted under proper clinical protocols. He placed the audio recording from Sunday's dinner, 12 minutes of conversation, in which my son and his wife discussed the hearing timeline and referenced Sunrise Gardens in relation to asset liquidation while I was in the room. He placed the documentation of the forged deed transfer Daniel had apparently attempted through a different vehicle 3 months prior, a quiet title action that Robert's paralegal had found in the county records at 11 the previous night. The opposing attorney was writing very quickly. Daniel was not writing. He was looking at me. Additionally, Robert said, and I heard the slight shift in his tone that I had come to recognize as the moment before something decisive, we submit documentation establishing that the respondent holds a valid security interest in the property at 4412 Creekside Lane, Brookhaven Estates, and further, holds the outstanding personal debt note for one Daniel G. Marsh in the amount of $1,040,000, acquired from the original creditor by legal assignment dated this past Sunday. The room was very quiet. Renee's pen touched the legal pad and did not move. Daniel turned toward his attorney and said something in a voice too low to carry. His attorney leaned away from him slightly, a subtle but unmistakable physical distancing. "Mr. Marsh," the judge said, and she was not looking at me. "Am I to understand that the property you listed among the petitioner's assets in this filing, the residential property at Brookhaven Estates, is in fact owned by the respondent you are asking this court to declare incompetent?" Daniel's attorney cleared his throat. "Your Honor, we were not aware. I'm asking your client." A very long pause. "I was told the property was managed through a client of my father's," Daniel said, and his voice had lost all of the careful sales manager certainty it usually carried. He sounded, for the first time in my memory, genuinely young and genuinely lost. "Then you were misinformed about the nature of your own housing arrangement for 6 years while filing a petition claiming your father cannot manage his own affairs." Judge Meacham looked at her clerk. "I'm noting for the record that the petitioner appears to have been operating under a fundamental misapprehension of basic financial facts pertinent to his own situation, while simultaneously asserting that the respondent lacks the capacity to understand his." She looked at Robert. "I'll hear your motion to dismiss." It took 11 minutes. I sat with my hands folded on the table and did not speak and did not need to. When the judge granted the motion, the sound of it was very small, just a word. Granted, barely louder than a breath, but the room changed when she said it, the way the air in a building changes when a structural problem is finally acknowledged. Daniel's attorney collected his papers in silence. Renee stood and walked to the door without looking at me. Daniel stayed in his chair after everyone else had moved. I looked at him from across the room. He was 41 years old and he looked exactly his age in a way he had not, somehow, before today. He had the expression of someone who has been so focused on getting somewhere that he failed to notice when the ground changed beneath him. "Dad," he said. I waited. "I didn't." He stopped. "The business failed. We were 3 months from losing everything. I didn't know what else to do." "You could have called me," I said. "That is what fathers are for." He looked at the table. "I thought you didn't have anything." "I know you did." I stood, straightened my jacket. "Robert will be in contact about the terms of the debt arrangement. I have no intention of destroying you, Daniel, but I also have no intention of pretending the last 6 months didn't happen." I walked to the door. I stopped with my hand on the frame. "Your son asked me twice this weekend if I was going to be okay," I said, without turning around. "An 8-year-old. He asked because no one else thought to." I paused. "Caleb is going to come stay with me on weekends for a while. He told me he wants to learn how to build things. I thought we'd start with a birdhouse." I left the room. In the hallway, the morning light came through the high courthouse windows in long, pale angles. Frank was waiting on a bench near the elevator, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. He handed me one without speaking. We stood there for a moment, 2 old men in a government hallway, drinking bad coffee, and for the first time in months, I felt the particular quiet that comes when something that has been pressing on the chest finally lifts. I thought about the pecan pie I had brought to dinner on Sunday. I had left it on the counter in the chaos of leaving, and I was fairly sure no one had eaten it. That evening, I drove to the bakery and bought another one. I took it home and ate a slice at my kitchen table with a cup of good coffee, in my own house, in my own chair, looking out at the dogwood tree in the fading light. The cardinal was there again at the feeder. I watched him for a long time. I called Caleb at bedtime. He answered on the second ring. "Grandpa Walt." He still said it the same way, full force, no reservation. "Hey, buddy, did you have a good birthday?" "Yeah." "Dad said you had to leave early because you were tired." "I wasn't tired," I said. "I had some things to take care of." "Are you coming to get me this weekend?" "Absolutely," I said. "I was thinking we'd go to the lumber yard first thing Saturday morning. I've got a project in mind." "What kind of project?" I looked at the feeder outside the window. "Something for the birds," I said. "Something built to last." After I hung up, the house was quiet again. But it was a different kind of quiet than it had been in months. It was the quiet of a place that belongs to you, fully and without condition. A place where no one is counting your silverware or watching which hand you lift your fork with. A place where the coffee is good and the chair fits exactly right, and the light at the end of the day comes in at exactly the angle you have always loved. I was 68 years old. I had outlasted a conspiracy organized by people who underestimated me. I had done it quietly, carefully, and without a single trembling hand. Patricia would have been insufferably pleased. If this story meant something to you, hit the like button and subscribe to Voice of Pops for more. And tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven your son? Or did I do the right thing? I want to hear from you.